Austrosaurus, southern lizard. Just saying it, it immediately makes you think about Australia and, well, giant dinosaurs.
Exactly. What kind of creatures were roaming down under all those millions of years ago? It's a great hook.
And that's what we're digging into today, right? We're looking at Austrosaurus, using the research papers you've got there.
Yeah, we're trying to pull out the really interesting stuff, the core details about this dinosaur. More than just the name.
So the idea is you can listen to this and get pretty well informed quickly. We'll cover the discovery, what it looked like, the debates, all that good stuff.
And we're mainly leaning on a recent scientific paper that re-looked at Austrosaurus,
Yeah.
but also pulling in some older studies to see how things changed.
Ah, okay. So you see the science evolving.
Precisely. It's a neat look at how our understanding shifts over time with new finds or new ways of looking at old finds.
Right. So our mission then is to piece together Austrosaurus. Who found it? What was it? When did it live? Where does it fit? And crucially, how have scientists' ideas about it changed?
That's the plan. Ready to jump in.
Let's do it. So where does the story even begin for Austrosaurus?
Okay, so it starts back in 1932. We're on Clutha Station, which is near Maxwellton up in North Queensland.
1932. Wow.
Yeah, and the discovery was made by a station worker, Mr. H.B. Wade.
So not a paleontologist on a dig, just someone working there.
Exactly. Pure chance, really. Which is kind of amazing when you think this was Australia's first big intro to Cretaceous sauropods.
How did the news even get out? I mean, from a remote station in the 30s.
Well, Mr. Wade told his station manager, H. McKillop.
Okay.
McKillop then told his brother, and eventually word and the fossils themselves got to the Queensland Museum.
You can just imagine the buzz when those bones arrived. Big dinosaur finds weren't exactly common then, were they?
Not at all, especially not sauropods from that period in Australia. So, yeah, it would have been quite something.
And those initial finds, they became the type specimen, the reference point.
So that's right. QMF2361. It started as just some pretty weathered vertebrae and rib bits. Later on, some other blocks of bone found nearby were added to that collection.
Okay, so a bit fragmented to start with.
Definitely, but important fragments.
And one of the sources, the 2017 paper, really stresses this point. This was the first named Cretaceous sauropod from Australia.
Yep. A huge milestone for Australian paleontology. Really put them on the map for this kind of dinosaur.
So, based on those bones and later work, what can we actually say about what Austrosaurus looked like? How big are we talking?
Well, estimates put it at about, say, 3.9 meters high at the hip
Okay.
and maybe 4.1 meters at the shoulder, which suggests, a fairly level back, not a huge slope.
Interesting. And there's another estimate, too, isn't there, from Gregory S. Paul?
Ah, yes, Greg Paul's figures. He suggested something more like 20 meters long that's 66 feet
Whoa.
and weighing maybe 16 metric tons or 18 short tons. Big animal.
But we need to remember that's based on incomplete stuff, right? So it's an educated guess.
Absolutely. Always a degree of interpretation with fossils, especially partial ones. But it gives you a ballpark. It was certainly large.
And the source material has pictures of some of those vertebrae.
It does, yeah. You can see the structure, even if they're worn.
Yeah.
Helps visualize the scale.
Okay, so big animal. When was it around? What was its world like?
We're talking early Cretaceous period, specifically the Albian stage.
Which is roughly?
Roughly 112 down to about 100 million years ago, give or take.
A very different time, different continents, different climate.
Totally different world. And its address was what we now call central western Queensland. The fossils come from the Uluru Formation there.
Got it. Uluru Formation, early Cretaceous.
Yeah.
Now, there used to be that old idea about sauropods, didn't there? That they lived in water to support their weight.
Oh, yeah, the semi-aquatic theory. That was popular for a long time.
What do the sources say about Austrosaurus and that idea?
Well, like for most sauropods now, that idea is pretty much debunked. The current thinking, based on bone structure where the fossils are found, everything really. Austrosaurus was a land animal, terrestrial.
Makes sense. Their skeletons look built for land, don't they?
They really do. Strong legs, robust build. And the environments they're found in usually suggest land, not swamps.
And didn't one source have a life restoration, a picture of what it might have looked like?
Yes, there is one. It's an artist's interpretation, of course, based on the bones and comparing it to relatives.
But helpful to picture it walking around ancient Queensland.
Definitely brings it to life a bit more.
Okay, so size, time, place, lifestyle. Now for the tricky part, the classification. This is where the science gets really interesting, isn't it?
It really is. This is where you see the debates and revisions happening.
So originally, back in 1933, Where did they put Austrosaurus in the dinosaur family tree?
Longmen initially classified it as a cetiosaurid.
Cetiosaurid? What does that mean, roughly?
At the time, Cetiosauridae was kind of a group for sauropods that seemed fairly primitive, not very specialized. Think things like Patagosaurus, maybe, or Shunosaurus, early branches of the sauropod tree.
Okay, so an early placement. But that didn't stick, did it? Things got complicated later,
So they
right?
certainly did. Fast forward to 2009, and you have research by Hocknull and his team, and they introduce a new sauropod name.
Wintenotitan.
That's the one. Windenotitan watsi. And here's the twist.
Yeah.
They described it based on material that had previously, back in '81, been linked to Austrosaurus.
Uh-oh. So they were looking at bones thought to be Austrosaurus and decided they were something else entirely.
Pretty much. And their analysis led them to suggest that the original Austrosaurus material, the holotype QM F2361,
Yeah.
was actually very, very similar to their new Wintenotitan. So similar, in fact, that they questioned if Austrosaurus mckillopi was even a valid name.
Wow.
They proposed it might be what's called a nomen dubium.
A doubtful name, meaning the original bones weren't distinct enough to define a unique genus.
Exactly. They argued the features weren't diagnostic enough. And it might just be the same as, or indistinguishable from, Wintenotitan, based mainly on vertebral features, the structure of the backbones.
So for a while there, Austrosaurus was potentially erased or absorbed into Wintenotitan. That's a major shift.
It was huge news in Aussie paleontology, yeah. Cast doubt on this foundational discovery.
Okay, so the plot thickens, but the story doesn't end there, does it? How did Austrosaurus make a comeback?
Well, then came the 2017 paper by Porpat and colleagues. They went back to the original Austrosaurus site, looked at the original bones and new bones found there.
And what did they find?
Their conclusion was, no, Austrosaurus is valid, it is distinct enough.
Okay. Vindication.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
But they also reclassified it. They didn't put it back with the primitive cetiosaurids.
Where did they place it then?
They identified it as a titanosauriform and tentatively placed it within a subgroup called Symphospondyle.
Titanosauriform. Symphospondyle. That sounds more advanced, right? Closer to the later giant titanosaurs.
That's the implication, yes. Yeah. Much more derived than originally thought. They looked at things like specific details in the vertebrae, the pneumatic features, air sacs within the bone, and the overall shape of the neural arches.
Features that link it more closely to that more advanced group.
Correct. Features that distinguish it both from primitive sauropods and potentially from Wintenotitan, supporting its validity and its placement within titanosauriforms.
So it went from primitive to maybe not existing to being part of this huge, successful group of later sauropods. What a ride.
It really showcases how science works, doesn't it? New finds, new analyses lead to revised understanding.
And the source gives the full breakdown, right? Kingdom, phylum, all the way down to Austrosaurus mckillopi.
Yep, lays out its current spot in the hierarchy, based on the latest consensus anyway.
It's like updating a profile picture based on new information.
A very, very old profile picture, and it's crucial to credit everyone involved. Longman in 33, Coombs and Molnar in 81, Long, Molnar, and Salisbury later.
And then Hocknull's team shaking things up in '09, and Porpat's team providing the latest detailed look in 2017.
Exactly. Each built on what came before, even when challenging it. It's how the field moves forward.
It really is a great example of that process.
Definitely. So if we were to sum up the key things to take away about Austrosaurus.
Okay, key takeaways. First, it's an early Cretaceous sauropod from Australia, found in 1932, named in 33.
And crucially, it was the first named Cretaceous sauropod from the continent, a landmark find.
Right. Then there's the whole classification saga, initially seen as primitive, then questioned entirely next to Wintenotitan,
Before being reinstated and reclassified based on newer analysis of more material.
showing how science isn't static, it refines itself. That nomen dubium phase is fascinating.
It really highlights the rigorous process involved.
Yeah.
You need good evidence to define a species.
And the current view places it as a valid genus, Austrosaurus, likely a titanosauriform, maybe a Symphospondylon, so related to some of the later giants.
That's the consensus emerging from the most recent detailed study. It's part of that bigger, more derived sauropod radiation.
It's amazing how one chance find by a station worker could lead to almost a century of scientific investigation and debate.
It really is. It shows that discoveries, even old ones, can keep yielding new insights as our methods and knowledge improve.
And it makes you realize, listening to this, how much our picture of the past is constantly being painted over, refined, details added.
Absolutely. what seems settled today might be viewed differently tomorrow with new evidence.
So this whole deep dive, it's not just about Austrosaurus, is it? It's about the scientific process itself.
I think so. It's a great case study.
Uh,
And maybe it leaves you wondering what else that we think we know pretty well about dinosaurs or anything else in the natural world
yeah.
might actually be due for a major rethink when the next key piece of evidence turns up or someone just looks at it from a completely new angle.
That's a great thought to end on, the ongoing quest for knowledge. Always digging deeper.
Always digging, sometimes literally.